Alrighty, what is up, everybody? Welcome back to the channel. Kyle Williams here. June is over, so we're coming with the live trading recap. And so June was pretty good. June was, I would say, pretty good, or really good. $96,000, $96,525.33 to be exact. And, this is a really solid month in many ways, and in a little bit of different ways, because as I talked about on the tweet when I sent, I said this month was really a lot of singles. Usually my months consist of one or two or three big, huge wins, and then that's kind of my entire month. This one, besides NKLA, which we'll go over, really just was a lot of just great, solid trades. Just nothing too big, but I took decent size. I made average to above average gains. And that was that, and that just adds up. And on top of that, not only was that the case, but on the losses side, I really maintained my losses. This large loss of $23K was by far my biggest loss. My second biggest loss after that was only $6K. And even on top of that, this $23K loss was actually like 6 or 7 smaller 3 to 4K losses just combined into each other. And so we'll go over that. So really, in terms of keeping my losses very manageable and intact, that's, I think, really the key that made me such a high and almost 6-figure month just below it. So let's jump right in. Let's talk about it, and let's go through all the trades. So the first one, and let's talk about week 1 here. First trade was on AI. Now, AI has been a popular theme throughout the entire year, but we're going to talk in particularly about this gap down day on June 1st here. Reason being was it was when they announced earnings the day before. It gapped down huge, and I really had no interest in trading it gapping down this far. When I want to typically short something around red green on a first red day or an overextended gap down and then cover into the downside, I don't necessarily want to see a stock gapping or opening up where the downside is in my head, right? And so we're opening down at like $33. I'm like, that's where I would have wanted to cover if I'm shorting from 40. So I had no interest in shorting it until it actually started to spike into resistance level, spike into these, or what once was support on the 30th and the 31st of May. As it started spiking into those levels, I thought to myself, oh, okay, this is now actually a good bounce short midday. So let's jump in to that midday or to that intraday trade. This was on June 1st. And so you see here it offered, now ignore this white line, this is the previous close, I think, of the last Friday before last week. But the actual close was up at near $40. And so, yes, it was a ways away, but you can clearly see this nice speed up into both these balances. And so I actually shorted both and made pretty good money. I'm pretty sure I actually shorted during a live webinar when I was doing for Clover Trading, and they got to see this live. But you'll see here, I shorted a little bit. This ended up actually being a fat finger. I actually planned on cutting it over these highs when it broke the first high, but I actually fat fingered. Instead of covering all my size, I covered 200 shares. I think it's what happened when I pressed the level 2. Usually when I do that, it actually changes my size as well if I don't look closely. And so when I did that, it changed my size from 2,000 shares or 3,000 shares I had to 200 shares, covered those 200 shares, and then still had all my size left. And it worked out. One of those times where a fat finger mistake actually worked out in my favor versus not. So I then covered that rest into the when it touched VWAP here. Next, it had the same setup twice, just a speed up bounce into resistance levels, shorted up in here. Then once I added the last add here on that lower high, then I moved my risk to the high a day and just stayed patient, faded it all the way down below 35, covered it. Did one more pull to VWAP, which was my original plan, but I just kind of wanted to lock in profits, make it easy when it went below 35. But all in all, made about $9,000 between the two of these trades. So I think $4,000 here and then $5,000 there. So really, really happy and excited about how I traded that. And again, mostly midday kind of bounce shorts are not necessarily a huge winner of mine. Yes, I've been profitable with them, but they've never been a huge account moving kind of trader or setup. They've just kind of been wallet patters. And so to make $9,000 on a setup that appeared twice was pretty cool to see and kind of get a good start to the month. Now, what led to both these days not even being $9,000, as you can see, was because I ended up taking some losses on SDA. SDA here, for those who did trade it, was just a choppy pain in my ass to really call it what it is. It's rain these wicks. You see these wicks? These are not misprints. This thing literally had this kind of range all day long. Quite intense and annoying. If we go to this specific day on again the 1st of June. I think I lost twice on it short and long. So if you really want a good way to make take 4 losses on both sides of the trade, trade SDA like I did. I don't even remember what it was, but let's just look at here. That's why I have to take pictures. But you can see this is my long trade on it. Tried to buy it here. And then again, you might be asking me, like, Kyle, why on earth are you buying this ticker anyway? Because it was such a difficult short for me, because I ended up losing so frequently on it short, I decided to screw it. Some of my worst short trades become and have turned out some of the best runners because they are so difficult short. So I tried to flip my bias and go long. And unfortunately, that led to me actually taking, again, 2 more long losses. So I had 2 short, 2 long. This one particularly is my long. So I bought it thinking it was going to squeeze back green. Quickly faded, sold that for a loss. Did it again when we were starting to actually consolidate and looked like we were going to start perking over red, green, and then these highs. It originally kind of worked, then it didn't. And so I thought it was more consolidating. So I just held on to it. Wanted to stick to my plan. Finally, late day, we start breaking some of this early support level in like the 36, 35 range. So I cut it there. What do you know? It ends up making a new low a day. And then in a matter of, 10 to 15 minutes, we literally go back and test the high a day. I mean, this ticker, and then making new highs in after hours, and then all of a sudden never going any higher. Like as you can see on the daily chart here, if we go, I don't think it ever actually went higher the next day. Yeah, like that was it. And then a huge gap down. I mean, this ticker was such a pain in the ass, so choppy and all over the place that the losses I got were deserved. I just shouldn't even touched it to begin with. I would have been better off. But luckily, again, I managed those losses small. I think between that long trade, I only lost like $3,000. This is a different trade, but we'll go to that later. But yeah, like lost $3,000 in the long. So very easy, very minimal. Didn't give too much gains away. That's why you see, the 2 trades here. Let's move on to the second week. Really, the only one I can really remember, and I reflected on that really was a good portion. I mean, almost, I'd say about half of this month, or this week, I should say, was VRSSF. This one was kind of a really great OTC runner that we haven't seen in a long time. Now, granted, it's not the most liquid, only 2 million shares a day, but it was enough to trade and to short it. Really good breakout over like the 180s there. Ran up all the way to the high 2s, so not the most extended, but technically the run did start from like 125. So from 125 to about over 250 is that 100% move I like to look for. The breakout to the highs just wasn't as extended, but nonetheless, 2 huge green days, getting that extension, getting that blow off volume at the bottom. I did decide and look for a short on this first top day, which ended up being the first red day of June 6th. So again, if we go into June 6th here, it actually was a bit choppy. Actually, let's see if I can actually just see the whole thing if I go to a month, because we want to see the days prior. Yeah, here we go. Great. And so huge, nice run into the close, gapped up and pulled. Right here is when I wanted to get short, when it went red on the day, because it had held red, I think, the previous 2 days. So the first time we're going red here is kind of the at least the initial entry I want to be taking. If we go, let's get rid of this trade. We'll go over this later. VRSSF here. You will see that I got short pretty much almost all my size. I remember actually talking about it to, again, another day I was doing a webinar about this trade, and I actually filled way more size than I thought I'd get. Now, granted, that doesn't mean it was size that I wasn't willing to take. It was absolutely size I was willing to take. But for a stock that only is going to have 2 or 3 million shares in the day, I didn't want really more than 30,000 max. But again, that's max. Like I was really only expecting to get like maybe 15 to 20,000 shares. But little did I know, right when I shorted, whoops, that's the wrong one. We got to go back here. I filled like 25K shares, like right on red green. And I was like, wait, what? Like there was just enough bidders to fill, and I filled it. I was like, oh, wow, okay. So it wasn't unexpected in the sense that I wasn't prepared for it. I was willing to take that much size. I just was fully expecting to be, I was expecting to be disappointed with not filling as much as I wanted. And so when I did actually fill as much as I wanted, I was like, oh, wow, that's kind of cool. And so I took the last 5K shares or so into red green on the bounce. Now, granted, it did come back green, and that I think has scared a lot of people out, because that typically, you don't like to see that when you're short. But again, the highs and the risk that was important to me was these 270s, like this little wick and pop out the open here that put a high in of 277. This was the area I wanted to risk, right? And so when we go back green here, it doesn't really scare me. I'm like, I want to cut where it matters. This pop back green, right, is not comfortable, but by no means does it mean my trade thesis is dead or over. And what do you know? You gave it a few minutes, it cracked back red, you get small last bounce here attempt, covered a bit into the first pull of the new low a day, covered the rest into this panic, and this ended up being really solid. I mean, this last panic here, or last print here, I actually did get the low a day. Only reason I did is because I actually just had an order already sitting there. It's not like I timed it perfectly. I just, typically I like to do like half preset orders, half kind of reacting and covering into weakness. And so I just had a preset order at like 215 and it filled. So I was like, oh, sick. And then I covered the rest as it started bouncing there. That's those reactive covers. It never went lower. And in fact, actually the rest of the day was quite a pain in the butt. Ended up going all the way back to pretty much testing those highs, pretty much double top, and then failing. And then what do you know, looking at the rest of the day or rest of the chart, it ended up actually gapping down and fading even more. I didn't trade these days. In hindsight, I look at it and be like, oh, I wish I could or wish I did. But again, I locked in like 12 grand or so on this trade. And so I just couldn't be happier about it. It was really straightforward OTC red day. Did a really great coverage down near the low of the day. Avoided the choppy grind back. And that was that. So really, really good trade there. I think the only other trade, I don't even think I remember, again, I don't remember any other significant trades. There must have been small wins. I think I'm going into next trades of this week, which ended up being a break-even week, which sucks, which again, we'll talk about it, why this loss was like this. The first one that I'm reminding me, and some of you who like to trade gap and craps are probably doing pretty well in this market, or at least in the previous market of May and June, because a lot of these gap and craps were working really well and doing really well. FWBI being one of them. Now, I always have to say this when I talk about gap and craps, and if you've heard me talk about gap and craps, you probably are like, Kyle, you're a broken record. I just say this because I'm sharing this because I have actually made money on this, but by no means are the gap and crap setups like a setup of mine or a setup that like I would consider part of my system, a setup that I consider really making a ton of money on. I argue in my head why I still trade them because they've never been a good money maker, but in this market, they just worked really well. And so there were about 2 or 3 trades this month that I actually did make money on gap and craps. Again, I don't really trade them a lot. I only trade them if I feel pretty convicted about it. FWBI being one of them. I forget why I was convicted. I think there was dilution. I'd have to go back, but again, I just didn't want to go back further enough for the sake of this recap. But again, daily chart, if you just look at the history, besides this little run on low volume, this has never had a great history, right? Any kind of pop or gap up or spike is met with selling and or just further downtrending, especially the last day with the most volume it had prior to this day, gapped up and then just faded. And so when we're here gapping up, from, the low ones all the way up to 270, 280, you have to ask yourself, like, given a crappy chart, given there's likely dilution, again, you should fact check that to make sure there was on any given gap and grab, right? That's why you're shorting it. But that big of a gap up, it's like, how much higher do you think it can go? Now, granted, they always can go higher, which is why we've seen other gap and caps in previous past like really catch shorts off guard. But again, in the month of May and June, a lot of gap and craps were working really, really well, which actually got me to kind of start tinkering and getting back into them, even though I was never very serious about them to begin with. But FWBI ended up being really great. A great winner. I made like 9K on this, which is way more than I would ever expect from a gap and crap. Mainly due to I wouldn't say luck, but just again, back to VRSSF placing orders in the right spots and just getting lucky. I'll show you in here in a second with this news release and then spike. I ended up getting short right out the open because a lot of red selling volume didn't really spike much. Clearly held 3 as a nice round number. And so I remember started getting short right away, risking those highs, chopped around, finally fell over. And then again, let's go to the trade so you see it there. Let's get rid of VRSSF. Here we are. So yeah, right, getting short, risking those highs, eventually falling over. Covered a bit here in the low 2s, but I remember wanting the crack of 2. I wanted to get like the 190s. So I actually placed orders in the 190s. And what do you know? When they put out like an offering midday, typical of dilutive company, right? And I had orders sitting. And so what do you know when it panics? I started filling. I was like, what's happening? It was so quick and immediate. I was like, oh crap, like something's happening before I even knew what the news was. And even on top of that, I actually got short into the bounce right before. I mean, this was like just a lucky trade in many ways. Not so much the entry, right? That was a good trade plan. But this last part here, the fact that I got filled into a bounce and then immediately news hit, I didn't even know about it. And then I had orders waiting to fill the rest of my shares, and I did. And then in doing so, before even knowing the news, because again, if it was like a really dilutive offering, this thing could have gone much lower much quicker, right? This could have gapped down and halted down and then reopened the low 2s or low 1s. But I just had orders sitting. I covered them and I avoided this squeeze, didn't reshort it. And of course, it would have been a good reshort. Like it actually did end up fading lower. It just had to squeeze out first. But one of those scenarios where just, again, placing orders in advance went in my favor. Granted, it could have not been in my favor. Like I said, if the news was that bad and there was no squeeze and this thing just gapped down or halted down and then gapped down to the low ones, I would have missed out on profits. But again, in this scenario, in this case, having those orders there really made this trade great and made it 9K. I just did not expect to make 9K on this. So that was really good. Again, another trade that was just above average. But again, a single for me overall in terms of how big a trade can be. As you know, some of my biggest trades are much bigger than 9K. But again, anything from 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9K is pretty good to be taking and locking in. So there's that. Now, what happened the rest of the week, or I guess specifically on the 15th, to lead me to pretty much giving back all my trade or my gains and then being break even on the week? It was good old CVNA. Now, CVNA here, I unfortunately missed this huge red day, which would have been really great. I would have been a great short, but I was at a wedding for the day. I was a groomsman, so that kind of took away from that. But again, it happens. Life happens. Like, you're not going to be a part of every single play. So I did miss that. But from that, and I don't want to blame myself for missing it, but I couldn't help but want to try to be short for this next bounce and then fade off, thinking we were going to see something like this, right? In the previous run we ran, we had a few days of bouncing, and then we faded off. And on top of that, there's a lot of shorts calling off for an offering. Now, I'm not in the business of trying to catch an offering. If I ever am in an offering short, it's because I just got lucky, just good timing. Again, similar to what we saw with FWBI, right? But I knew in the back of my mind, they could do an offering, right? I'm not expecting them to, but they could. It's there. They have a lot of debt. There's a lot of people saying that this company is kind of not in a great shape financially, but there is a lot of shorts in it, which is why it's squeezed and has gone as high as and well as it does. But besides that, and I actually did make some money long. I remember longing it in this consolidation, knowing there were a lot of shorts, and then selling it in like the 15s. I took it from 12 to 15, and then unfortunately missed this blow off day, which would have been sick. That was some money I left on the table. But besides that, I ended up taking a small swing short, as well as day trading this every single day on the same trade and the same broker. So it's like I had, say, like 1,000 shares of a swing short, risking the highs, but then every day as like a daily bounce short kind of set up, I kept taking 1 or 2 attempts a day and then cutting it. So ultimately, it led to me having a very small swing short of a loss, 2 or 3 days or 2 or 3 times a day, taking 2 or 3K losses. Before you know it, finally, when we start squeezing out on this day to new highs, or just barely, I cut it. I say, nope, we're done. Like, clearly this is not working. Clearly there's a bunch more shorts in this. And unfortunately, all those losses together added up to a negative 23 grand, right? That's the loss you see here on this final day. Again, if we look into the trades, I'm pretty sure I screenshotted them here. Here we are. So this was the first time, right, getting short on the first day, all the way down at 19. Again, kind of silly. But again, I kind of got caught in the fact that this was such a weak, heavy day the day prior that I would not have expected this, or I wouldn't have not been surprised had this done the same thing and sold off to like 17, 16, right down to this previous breakout level. Of course, that would end up being dead wrong, right? We were strong right away. I cut it, so that was the first loss. Then start putting in my small swing idea. I'm risking the highs. Then we go into the next day, right? Doing the same thing, right? Shorting into here, covering there, shorting again. Taking that overnight, thinking that now I'm going to risk the highs here. And then what do you know? Again, having to cut that into those highs, try to reshort again, cut again, and then cut the final swing there as it's approaching those highs of the 27s, 28s. So as you can see here, just too many tries. And again, I have a rule to only give myself 3 to 5 tries. And I think the problem here, again, another scenario to look out for is that not just giving 3 to 5 tries a day, but over the period of the stock, right? I'm usually cut myself off at 3 to 5 tries per day. But then this is a different scenario where I was trying to like swing it, but also day trade it. But again, looking back, it's like, well, Kyle, you end up taking like 7 or 8 tries, more of the tries than you wanted to be giving it in the first place. And so that's what led to that bigger loss. So it's unfortunate, but again, 23 grand is not the end of the world, especially losing it over a few days. That's why you can't even see it in the chart here, right? It's like I kind of was able to gradually ink out other profits to mitigate that big loss. Still breaking out in the week, so it is what it is. I still took 23 grand losses nonetheless. Would have been better if I didn't, but it is what it is. And even now, CVNA is still holding up, still kind of making higher highs, still squeezing shorts. It's a very emotional chart, as you can see, like straight up, straight down, straight up, straight down, straight up again. And so who knows where this goes. I would love this to finally just squeeze everyone out once and for all, really get another good run like we saw here or here on the first day of it all. Again, we'll see. I don't really know. I'm just here watching it to see how it plays out. So that's that. Going into the next week, and specifically on the 23rd, was where my biggest gain came from, right? The 27 or the 37K here. That was from NKLA. Beautiful, beautiful first red day here on the 16th. Now, granted, you hear me say the 16th, but I covered it on the 23rd. Yes, that's because I held this thing way too long and I ended up giving a lot of profits back. So what happened? It had a beautiful blow off, from 50 cents all the way to 180. Beautiful parabolic daily and intraday on this particularly on the 15th. It was a beautiful parabolic. And then the next day we gap up, but we're gapping below the previous day's highs. That is kind of one of the first signs for me that I was like, okay, this might be backside, especially given the fact that it just sold off from 180 down to 140. There's a lot of resistance now. And that's what it did. It pretty much opened right where it opened. It was pretty much the high day, give or take a couple cents, and then just faded. And again, if we go into the trades, that's exactly what happened. Got short, little small pop. I talk about this pop in great detail in the video lesson I gave for four-leaf clovers. But again, it quickly failed, right? That pop did not last long. Covered into the first red-green move. So hold the rest of this bounce. Covered more into the low ones, low teens, I should say. And the goal for me was to cover the rest into a move closer to 1, like get a second red day lower. And as you can see with the daily chart, that did not happen, right? And again, the mistake here was that instead of covering it on this day, on the 20th, realizing it wasn't going to go lower, I just held it. I said my average is so good, it's at like 159, 160. I shouldn't even bother. I've already locked in profits. I could easily risk the highs and be okay. And again, easier said than done, because once it started bouncing and actually going right back to my average, that thought of I'm comfortable, I've locked in profits, I can stay short, turned into holy crap, you just gave away easily 5 figures in gains. What are you doing? You could have just reshorted, you could have just covered it and reshorted it at your same average on this bounce day. Like, what are you doing? And so I ended up covering a large portion of my shares on that bounce day, ultimately letting me be like finally calm down and realize once I was level-headed enough after covering, I said to myself, Kyle, this is not the day to cover. This is the day to like add to your short or reshort if you already covered. And so I did end up reshorting it. It did hold the highs. Next day, it gapped down, swung it one more day, covered into the 120s, more or less being a punishment for myself of like, you know what, you already are too greedy. You were already too patient in the first place. Just lock it in the 120s and call it a day. And of course, and again, also the range was kind of getting smaller. Instead of having a huge red day, these next 2 red days were very small in range. I just didn't care to really hold it short for another 3, 4, 5 days at 5 or 6 cents, 10 cents a day to get back to $1. And of course, the very next day, once I've fully covered, it actually opens up the range and goes back down to the low ones and ideally $1 the next day, which is where I wanted to cover in the first place. So very frustrating, but it happens. It's what I get for being too patient in the first place on the beginning of it. Again, in an ideal world, it would have better just lock it in, not take it overnight, and then end up actually seeing, oh my gosh, it's actually bouncing back to where I was short originally, getting short there, and then fading it one more time to the low ones. But again, nonetheless, I still locked in 37 grand. Really great trade. Could have locked in, call it 50 or 60 grand had I played it better, but it happens. I'm human. Mistakes are made, and this was one of them. So, and even then, we're actually holding up, which is kind of impressive. We'll see where that goes in July as well. I really have no idea, but it would be sick if they run, right? Of course, as I'm biased, right? I would love for this to run higher and short it again. So that was that. Next trade was another AI on AI, and this one's particularly long. So when AI, let's go back to the 1 year. When AI, we had the earnings, right? I shorted a little bounce short, and it came back and started consolidating here. I thought to myself, man, we are holding above these highs of 30s. We are now consolidating in the former support, now resistance levels of the mid to high 30s. I thought to myself, man, if we start breaking back over 40, it's going to be very likely we start testing these highs and maybe even breaking out. So unfortunately, I wasn't watching it close enough, and I did miss this buy over like 39, 40 area. Unfortunately, I chased it a bit and just bought it at 30 or at 43, but risking that $40 level. I thought, 40 being a round number, being former resistance, now support, it should hold. And if we go higher and blow off, this thing could see 50, 60, maybe even 70 in a very rare case. blow off scenario. And so I took it long, risking 40. Originally we were working, right? We got as high as like 48, 49. But again, in my thesis, I'm thinking at least 50, 55, 60. I don't think we haven't seen any blow off volume, right? All these previous runs had some kind of blow off volume. This one we did not. We didn't, eclipse or equal the previous days or the previous run's volume. So a lot of factors to me just didn't feel like we were truly blowing off yet. I understood we were just actually we were running, right? We were increasing in kind of the run, but I just didn't see all those factors. So I did stay long. I stuck to my plan. Unfortunately, when it started gapping or just selling off every day, on this last day, I did finally sell it at like 41, mid 40s, because I just realized like the play's over. It's dying. Did lose about 4K, which is more than I wanted to. I remember like downsizing and then re-adding somewhere in like the 45 range, which unfortunately led to another like 900 in losses. So instead of losing like 3K, I lost like 3,900 or so. It happens. I'm more happy that I stuck to my plan, because had my plan worked, had we seen a true blow off, I would have made much, much more than, and then in terms of a risk reward, than risking say $4,000. I would have made 10, 20, maybe even 30, right? Had this gone to like 50 or 60 or 70. Again, maybe too wishful thinking, but I just, in a bubble or in a kind of supernova run like this, further than expected is always possible. If you've been around long enough, you know exactly what I'm talking about with some of these runs. And so that's what I was trying to see if that would play out with AI. It didn't, so we took a small loss. No big deal. Next would have been, this is now we're into the last week. We're into the final stretch here. BBBYQ was a great long. It actually gave me nostalgia and feelings of missing the 2021 bull market when we saw OTCs go absolutely mad. You can't even see the trade because it's so low. I have to actually zoom in here. But again, this was actually when it was BBBY over here. We talked about that in previous months and recaps. But finally, they've gone to the OTC market. They've given themselves a little Q, little bankruptcy ticker. And this run right here made me like, almost $9,000. At the time, E-Trade Pro told me $6,000, so I thought I made 6. But I think there was a glitch, because once I got my broker statement back, it told me like nearly 9, like 8,800. And I was like, wow, sick. Like this was, again, if I make any decentable size long like that, on a play like this, I'm stoked. And so what was the play here? For me, I mean, yes, it technically was a breakout, but a lot of times it's just a look in the intraday that tells me like, hey, this thing is likely to gap up, because OTCs are so prone to it if they have a certain look to them. And so what would that look was, and again, I didn't even know the news. I found out the news in hindsight, what it was and what it likely was running to. But essentially, again, let's actually go to the daily chart one more time so you see. Again, turn in OTC all the way down here at like 6-7 cents, ran up, pulled back, consolidated, broke out, another run, pulled back, consolidated. And so you just see this like in a wave. So I got a run, a pullback, another run, a pullback. And so when we started kind of popping up in this green day with increased volume back to these highs, I thought to myself, we might just get another momentum, another piece of running. Not necessarily a breakout. I wasn't really caring for the breakout level, although I was watching it as a level to watch for. The breakout wasn't the play for me, right? It was more just catching some kind of shift of momentum for more upside. And so when we look in that big green day here, I honestly didn't even see this morning spike. This morning spike is what got it on my radar. So once we started consolidating here, I thought to myself, well, we can start convincingly break over 29 and then hold it and then start breaking over 30. That's the momentum I'm trying to look for. That's like this little look here on an OTC kind of chart is what I like to look for, of holding nice and sideways near its highs and then late day breaking those highs. Like that's like the perfect scenario for me for wanting to catch a gap up and morning spike. And so when it gapped, when it started spiking over 30 and with all this volume coming in, I said, yep, this is it. All the indicators are there. All the signs are there. I want to be long. Originally risking like 27, this support level here. Got long at 30, partially filled, but it filled like 80% of the size I wanted. Had it spike, filled the rest of the size I wanted back on this dip into the 31s, spiked again, closed at like 32, 33, held it overnight. And now my risk can honestly be like 30 cents or even red-green. Ideally red-green, right? Some of the best plays never even go red. So again, that's what I usually like to risk. And what do you know? Small gap up, ended up just barely testing the red-green level. And then what do you know? Straight up, right? And this is what I love. This is picture perfect for me. Sold a piece into the breakout level, sold the rest into 37, and then the last couple pieces just above or at 38 here. Ended up actually dip buying this too. Once I started panicking and going red, I'm like, oh crap, this actually is a huge failure, but a great panic. Tried to dip buy it in the mid 28s there, flipped it in like the 30 level, right at 30, right 29s, and then sold the rest. I had like one piece left and sold it at the new low of day because it just wasn't a good bounce. Turns out that was the low of day, and then it bounced well. Like I wish I would have saw this bounce here first, but it is what it is. I made like an extra $400, nothing silly, nothing crazy. Again, the majority of that gain was this beautiful run in the morning. And again, that's what I look for. Like if I'm ever longing in OTC, that's not a panic dip buy, and it's some kind of a momentum shift, a momentum push into a breakout. Like BBBYQ here, this is like picture perfect, and that's why I say I got nostalgia of back in 2021 because I took this trade probably on a daily basis, like, and not just one trade, like 3 of them. The OTC market was that hot back then. I made a lot of money long back then, and this is what it was, right? So it was really cool to see that happen. Other than that, the only other trade that really closed off this week and was really frustrating was FRCB. Again, some similar chart where like BBYQ just got crushed with the banking sector, the banking crisis. Finally went to the OTC land. Let's pull it right up right here. So went to OTC here. No real true run, but we finally actually did break out over this like 48.50 level. Didn't take this any long. This was one I did actually let get away. I did not see it long. I did not care for it long until it was too late and it was having this huge run. And unfortunately, I started getting short, which again, in hindsight, it looks good on the daily chart. Like, of course, you would have made money short, but I actually didn't. I tried shorting this parabolic here. Unfortunately, just being very choppy, right? If you know how parabolics work, I like them to pull right away. So into this move, I want to see a pull, or maybe at most a bounce, a small like bounce. Like this bounce is fine, but then having it pull right away. And so the fact that we didn't, the fact that we bounced, pulled, and then started consolidating at highs, I'm like, this is going to go higher. This is not how a parabolic should work. I end up just chopping myself up here, thinking it's gonna whether it's gonna pull or go higher, and the fees racked up massively. So I ended up taking like a 2 to 3K loss on this, maybe even 4K after fees. I have to check, but somewhere in there, right? Small loss nonetheless. But again, to see it then work and then go to 60 and even high 50s, which is where I thought it could go, was frustrating, very frustrating. Didn't long this move into the late day, even though it's kind of very similar to BBYQ, where it's like it's holding its levels, it's starting to break out, volumes coming in. And again, the next day, slight gap up, morning push. I mean, the same kind of framework right there. Didn't take it long, unfortunately. Did get short into this push, starting in, didn't fill all the size I wanted, and then really started getting short my actual position at 85 here. Pulled, held red-green, spiked, very annoying. Started holding and holding and holding. And I thought to myself, eventually this is going to roll over. Right? I feel confident in my stop loss at 95. Eventually, when it started rolling over again here, I said, okay, let's move this stop loss down to this 90 level. And what do you know? It holds again, then breaks over this level. I say, all right, here we go. This is where I cut it. I think I either cut it here thinking it was going to break 90 or here. I can't remember exactly. And unfortunately, I don't have my trades up here. I got lazy here on saving them. Or they're on my other computer. Unfortunately, I still have to transfer them over, I should say. And so, yeah, it broke out. I thought it was like, great. At least it goes higher and I can short it another day, right, at a higher price. And what do you know? It double tops, like perfectly at 95 and then just fades. And then what do you know? The red day I wanted it to have here, it ends up having here. I mean, beautiful, beautiful panic. Very, very heavy. No even attempts of bouncing or saving it. Beautiful bounce, could have reshorted right into those highs of the day and then right back down. I mean, really 2-in-1 trades. You could have taken the range here and took in pretty much the same range again. Why this was this day and not on this day, I don't know. My skepticism or my guess is that there was somebody short in this and just needed to get out. And so every time it dipped, they just kept saving it and bidding it up because once it got to 95, like there clearly was no more strength or momentum to get it back going. So I may never know. It doesn't matter. The point is ultimately between this whole 3 days here, I lost 30-something hundred ish or so. So again, small loss overall, but just very frustrating because had it worked beautifully, right? Had we had this kind of red day on this day, I mean, this could have been a 5-figure trade, right? Given the size I took at 85 and then given that I could have covered it at 60 or even lower, would have been a really good win. But it happens. Not all plays can work out as well as you would like them to. But again, that's that. Right, that gets me to the month. Again, majority of that month, that really extra cushion was from NKLA. Again, but all those solid, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 grand like profits just add up. On top of the fact, like I said, just there was no really big losses besides that CVNA trade. Really kind of makes you like. For me, I look at this month, I'm like, it doesn't feel like I made this much. But when you do the math and you add it all up, you're like, oh wow, like every little piece matters, every little distinction and like factor about how this month went matters. and ultimately led to much more than I realized. So that's really cool. Not very typical of a summer month for me. As we go into as we go into July and August, specifically August, really more August and September, have been some of the lower trading months for me, profitably wise. If we go back here, last year, 12 grand. Again, it's great that I'm still profitable. September was pretty good at 75. But August here particularly, this has been the theme for August where I maybe still be profitable, but I take like a massive haircut to profitability, right? And it's not because I took off, but it's because I just, didn't get where I wanted to go. And actually I had a lot of great months, but last year was because of a big loss of, I think it was HKD was that did to me here. So that's that. But again, 2021, 34K, that was a lower than average month. 2020 was actually really good. That's actually probably my best August. We go to 2019, $1,000, 4 years ago. So as you see here, it's a hit or miss for August, and the same thing is true for September. So we will see when we get there, but that's kind of where my head's at as we go forward into these summer months. Anyways, guys, thanks so much for watching. I will see you guys next month when July is over. Anyways, have a great month. Best of luck to you guys. I'll see you then. Peace.